Welcome to Sweet Valley Diaries, the podcast that puts fictional teens through harrowing ordeals for your amusement. Book number 56, Lost at Sea.
Will Elizabeth ever see Jessica again?
So does that make me Miss America?
Well, hello, gladiators. Welcome to the podcast again. Back with our back to our regularly scheduled program, as they say. Haley Tubbs is my guest. Hi, Haley.
Hello!
I was just going to start talking to you casually and realize that the professional thing to do would be to introduce you. Hi.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hello.
So last week, we had a little surprise hiatus where we were like out of sequence, but now we're getting back into this regular sequence of things, Lost at Sea. So the gladiators have been waiting for this with bated breath, I can only presume.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of this podcast coming back with a bang.
Listeners may be aware of Haley if they have children from the age of like 4 to 9, 4 to 11 that are interested in science, because you're something of a child celebrity. Well, that makes it sound like you're a child. You are a celebrity among nerdy children.
I mean, I also consider myself a nerdy child, so I don't take offense to that at all.
None intended. None at all.
Yeah, Marissa and I work together on this awesome app called Tappity, where we bring the excitement of science to the youth of the world, truly all around the world, which has been such a very fun thing to be a part of.
It's really super fun. I will put a link to the app in the show notes. I'm sure the founders of said app will be thrilled that that's happening. I know that some of the listeners have children, but it's so fortuitous that this book ended up being ostensibly about a science project.
I know! When I first started reading it, I was like, is this why Marissa chose me for this one? This is perfect. Like getting into the tide pool research and all that stuff. I was like, yes, give me all those details.
It's just a thing that happens sometimes. The stars align and it's just the perfect book for the perfect guest reader. So, right. Lost at Sea is a title that gives away a lot of what the book is about. It's
sure
what it says on the label, but surprisingly enough, does start as a premise with a science class extra credit. Jessica Wakefield is behind in chemistry class. Like, she's failing chemistry. Mr. Russo appears, who's the teacher, seems to be some kind of like all-purpose science teacher. And they even make reference to that.
They do. I was confused at first because I was like, this seems very much like a marine biology project, but she's talked about how she's failing chemistry. And then there was one point in the book where they address like, and it doesn't even matter that this doesn't have anything to do with chemistry. It'll boost my science grade overall. So it did definitely start to seem like maybe Mr. Russo was just, the all-purpose science teacher, just taught every subject, and they each benefited each other.
I mean, super generous of Mr. Russo to allow such a thing, but I guess he wants to maximize the number of kids that come on his really complicated and like a bizarre science field trip, extra credit field trip. There are only 16 kids that go on it.
First of all, I was surprised that it took so much urging. That seems like a very fun thing to me. So the first half of the story, when it was like Jessica's friends, like trying to get out of it and talking about how boring it's going to be. And I was like, this is, first of all, being a Southern Californian, Anacapa Island is awesome. So to go on a boat for school credit for free to a tropical island sounds like something that I would pay for.
So Anacapa Island is a real place. Yes. I didn't do my research here. This is perfect guest, Haley. I thought maybe it was just kind of recently we read a book where they were talking about a place called Renoma County.
I love that.
I thought that this was maybe, Anacapa has the same number of syllables. It's like Catalina. I was getting sort of like Catalina Island vibes. But that's so cool. They went to a real place. Yeah. That's amazing.
The Channel Islands. Yeah.
I knew the Channel Islands were real. And the fact that there are multiple Channel Islands does become significant to the plot of this book. But at the outset, we were so excited, we just dove right into it. So we'll do a little bit of set dressing for the listeners here.
Great.
At the outset, Jessica and Elizabeth are both going to be going on this class trip, and it really sets up these personalities, right? Because Jessica really wishes she didn't have to waste a perfectly beautiful weekend day going on this stupid science trip. and then spends most of the science trip trying to not do science if she can get away with it. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is getting a great grade in science, but she sees... I'm giving away my position, which the gladiators know very well. I'm an Elizabeth, but I was going to say, she sees it as the great opportunity that it is. But I mean to say, she thinks of it as something that will be fun. So she's going to go and have fun. And they get on this boat with a bunch of other kids. And there's like a whole laundry list of other students. Did any of them stand out to you?
Enid, Elizabeth's best friend, there was a pretty clear picture of her and how she differed from Jessica's best friends.
Yes, Lila Fowler, I believe, is also on the trip.
Oh, yes. She was I feel like I got a pretty strong taste of who she was immediately.
Yeah. There's a funny line early on where Lila is really dismissive of the vessel that they are riding out to Anacapa Island. It's called the Maverick. She's like, oh, such a small boat. And we get a glimpse inside Jessica's inner monologue. She's like, it doesn't seem that small to me, but all right. I guess Lila's just used to mega yachts.
Sure. And finding out that she was the daughter of one of the richest people in Southern California.
That's right. George Fowler.
Which is quite a feet because Southern California is full of some rich people. So you can only imagine the size of yachts they were frequenting.
Yes. Well, he's new money. He's in Silicon, I think. So only going to become richer as the books go on, I'm sure. What did I write down here? I wrote, Randy Mason and Lois Waller are like the kids on Saved by the Bell that the show's not about. Like, they have included these like mostly the like sort of main characters, then a couple of like randos that we've heard of before, but they barely warrant a description. They're like some of the only people in Sweet Valley High that are not attractive and are not described as being attractive. And of course, once they get to the island, Jessica is paired up with them and Winston Egbert in a group of 4 to look at tide pools. So Mr. Russo has a really clever little ruse that he does where he makes all of the students that seem to be flunking his classes be the ones that have to write down everything.
And present.
And one of the other students that has to do that is Ken Matthews, who plays an important part in the early pages of this book, right?
Yes, Jessica's quest to get his attention that was thwarted at every turn.
Oh, you know what? We can, even though this is early on and we just started the recap, I think we can go a little bit into the part of the podcast where we talk about boys right off the bat. Because a lot of the boy talk in this book is at the beginning and it's front-loaded and back-loaded. It's all coming from Jessica's perspective for the most part. But here's something that Jessica says. This may just be a class field trip to you, but I can see its deeper potential, Jessica declared in a sophisticated tone. For example, it's a chance to work on my tan and a chance to work on Ken Matthews. Wiggling her eyebrows suggestively, Jessica strolled past Elizabeth out of the bathroom. Ken Matthews, Elizabeth repeated, surprised. A classmate of theirs at Sweet Valley High, Ken was captain and star quarterback of the school football team. Jessica had dated Ken occasionally in the past, but Elizabeth had thought that was it as far as their romance was concerned. Since when are you interested in Ken again? She asked. Since I checked out the list of people signed up for the field trip, and he was the cutest one on it, Jessica answered, matter-of-factly from her bedroom.
So great.
Yeah.
So great. The idea, and it's not even like it's like a week-long trip somewhere and she's got to fill her time. It's like she has to spark a relationship and bring it to fruition in this like 6-hour field trip, or else it's all been for naught.
Just this one afternoon, yeah.
And there's another part later where she's talking to Lila, and Lila's like, ugh, like he's old news, I guess, assuming like you've already dated him.
Like you've been there, done that, Jessica. Yeah. Which is kind of news. I don't remember that. I mean, that happened purportedly in their sophomore year, which is before these books start. So that was kind of fun to get a glimpse. They even have a little back and forth exchange at one point where we hear about how the things they used to do, the dance they used to go to, and how he ran out of gas. And Jessica was all prepared for it to be just, that was just a line. But then he left her in the car while he walked to a gas station, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yes. And their kiss on the beach. But it seems like this was I want to know why it ended. It seemed like they were both pretty into each other, unless there really was nothing there, and truly the excitement is just that he is the most eligible man on this very short afternoon field trip.
Yeah.
She made a comment about like these two other people are taken, like Winston's a dweeb and like Mr. Russo's too old, so like this is what I got. So.
She literally says Mr. Russo's too old.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so she's flirting a lot on the way over there with Ken, but she's thwarted at every turn by Winston's antics because Mr. Russo had this buddy system thing set up. So she's thwarted at every turn by Winston, who is her buddy.
The worst part of all of that was seeing like Ken join in with Winston in like laughing at Jessica's expense. I was like, "Ooh, girl, like he has laughed at you several times, and like you're not embarrassed. You keep on trucking. Like you are still trying to shoot your shot, even though like Winston is playing practical jokes on you the whole time." And
right.
Ken always is like in on it with Winston and is laughing at your expense. I think I would have slunk away much earlier, but she is a very confident woman.
Yeah, you're reminding me that once they get to the island and Jessica has just like a few minutes where Winston has screwed up their tide pool by accidentally stepping in it, and it's like all cloudy and they can't make any measurements. So they're taking a 15-minute break to let the cloud of dust and destruction that Winston has left in his wake kind of clear. And so she thinks, oh, this is my opportunity to go talk to Elizabeth's group, which Ken is in. And like no sooner does she go over and like say, hey, hey, everybody, hi, Ken, then people start laughing at her because Winston has sneaked up behind her and put a crab on her head, a hermit crab. So that's what Winston's got going on. And Jessica is really pissed about it, understandably.
Yeah, she was set that she was going to spend the entire time with Ken, and then it was dictated that she would not see him the entire time because Mr. Russo put them in separate groups. And then she was like, well, maybe I can sneak away. And then, like you said, Mr. Russo was like, actually, you're the scribe of the group, so you have to be there the whole time. Yeah. And also, there's a buddy system, someone who will be watching you to make sure you don't sneak away. So
it's almost like Mr. Russo knows what these kids are capable of.
Sure. That's definitely the sense I got. Just putting like one attractive person in every group so that none of them can meet up secretly.
Yeah.
Turn the trip into some kind of sandals vacation.
Gotta say, I wouldn't think it would be that hard for a teacher to keep an eye on 16 students. And I don't know where Mr. Russo is during all this. Maybe he's off having a Mai Tai somewhere. Like that was his plan. But all this is actually fairly significant setup for what's to come. Because before long here, what we're going to have on our hands is something that I have been saying for a while. I was surprised it didn't exist. And that is a Winston book. Because this book is about to become, in a way, our first, like, Winston book. I mean, he doesn't get a spot on the cover. Gladiators will describe the cover in a minute. But, it's largely about him, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't know anything about if he'd been introduced previous to this book. But yeah, you really get like the ins and outs of his personality, like who he truly is as a person and how he covers it up, and like the personality that he's sort of forged for himself and how that contradicts who he really is inside. Like it's a deep dive into who he is and his character development.
Absolutely. Like not just the class clown, but like what drives him to be the class clown.
Sure.
So before we get Winston really gets showcased, though, he's just being the class clown. He's annoying Jessica. And finally, it's time for them to kind of head back to the mainland. And that gets sort of hurried along because there's a storm coming in. So they've got to get back on the boat. And it's kind of cold. And while they're on the boat back, Jessica tries to get just like one last opportunity to kind of cozy up to Ken, especially since Elizabeth is like giving her the like wingwoman assist by occupying Winston in a conversation. So they're having a conversation reminiscing about back in sophomore year when they went on some dates. The boat took an extra hard bounce across a large wave, and Jessica found herself thrown against Ken. He put an arm around her to steady her, and then left it there. Ken's body next to hers made Jessica's toes tingle with excitement. She was plenty warm now. So exciting things happening on this boat, but it's about to get a lot more exciting, right? Because the boat is about to start taking on water. The waves are crashing and things are looking bad.
And then things really never make their way back to Ken Matthews again for the rest of
the book. The entire book.
The closest. It seemed like they were, having an intimate conversation closer and closer. It seems like there was going to be a kiss any minute. And then the boat was literally thrown. So
there is one funny moment that happens right before that, which it's like things have gone from bad to worse, but not as bad as they're going to get. And they've started like they're going to evacuate already. Like, so Mr. Russo starts like pulling out evacuation rafts and like handing out oars and life vests. It's just also gives you a glimpse into what's going on in Jessica's mind. Like, she's really got a one-track mind here. "Don't worry, Jess," Ken said. "We'll be fine." Jessica was more excited than anxious. Captain Marsden had said the Coast Guard was coming, so there really wasn't any danger involved, she thought. But talk about romantic. She and Ken Matthews, soaking wet and clinging to each other in a tiny lifeboat in the middle of a raging sea. Mr. Russo had pulled the tab on the first lifeboat, and it inflated rapidly. "Okay," he yelled, "2 people and 2 oars to a lifeboat." Jessica and Ken pressed forward along with the others. Then Mr. Russo added, "Buddy system." "Buddy system," Jessica groaned. Ken gave her a last squeeze and dashed over to join Enid, leaving Jessica with Winston. I laughed. I thought that was funny.
I was stressed, honestly. Like, I thought after all the trials she had been through, like you said, her one-track mind, like she has been clear from the beginning that this is the only thing she's focused on. This is her one goal. And just watching her like relentlessly go toward this goal and just everything getting in her way. So when it got to the point where it was finally going to happen, and then, they were evacuating the boat and she was still optimistic and she was like, I'm still kind of getting what I want. And then boom, taken away from her. I felt stressed. I was a little bit upset for her. I was like, man, you cannot catch a break.
Yeah. On just that line, she was more excited than anxious. Like, she's just not worried at all. She's like, this is going to be romantic.
This will be a great story. Yeah.
And it's that attitude sticks with her, strangely enough, even through the events that are about to unfold, which are she and Winston are in the lifeboat. Erin, Dallas, and Elizabeth are in another lifeboat, and they only have 1 oar. Well, that's because Winston took 3 by accident. So they paddle over in these huge waves, and the fog is so thick they can hardly see through it. And Winston stands up to, like, toss an oar over to them, and a big wave comes and overturns Jessica and Winston's life raft. And nobody knows what happened to them. Jessica, we learn not too long after this, her vest she didn't cinch it up tightly enough, which, kids, cinch up your vests.
Here's the lesson.
If you're going to wear a life vest.
Make it count.
And it comes off. Luckily, she's a strong swimmer. But this doesn't put anyone's minds at ease in terms of the people that have lost sight of Jessica, right? Because she's wearing the canary yellow life vest, and it's the only yellow life vest on the whole boat. So when things clear a little bit and this vest turns up, they're like, oh no, maybe she drowned.
Which, I mean, sounds likely. Like, it checks out, right? Like, yeah, reasonable assumption. It's difficult to think that someone could, like, I don't know, tread water through an entire storm without any flotation device. Like, that's...
Yeah. And she doesn't know. She's like kind of like laying back and like letting the tide take her. She's like, I hope I'm not going out into the open ocean. But I guess she has the thought that's like, well, things are bad, but they're not as bad as they could possibly be. So good for her. And then she washes up on an island. So we have this dramatic irony thing going on as readers, right? Like, we know that Jessica's okay, but we keep on cutting back to the rest of the boat and the Coast Guard, and then eventually Sweet Valley, where everybody is like, it's looking bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I was grateful that I was thinking to myself, like, well, if we weren't cutting back and forth between Jessica and Elizabeth, and I truly, like, if they cut from Jessica's point of view to Elizabeth's point of view, like they did, but then stayed that way, I would have a much different experience reading this book, because they really delved into, like, Elizabeth and her family like mourning, and like just like a very realistic picture of them like in their house, like listening for any news from the phone. And
Alice trying to keep a strong front, but then, Elizabeth notices that there's like a tear streaming down her mother's face while she's offering like coffee and lemon bars to her son and daughter.
In her, exactly. Going up to her room and being like, "Is this mess the last that I'll ever have of her?" Like,
Aww.
It made me like, honestly, if I didn't know that Jessica was okay, I'd be like, I don't know that I want to keep reading this book. It's too sad. But like knowing that everything was going to be fine made it okay. I'm not a big fan of sad things. So I was like, I'm so glad I know that this ends well. Or else I'd be crying.
I wonder, if that was an editorial choice to avoid that, because even like the cover of this book, you read the subtitle, "Will Elizabeth ever see Jessica again?" And that, first of all, raises some questions about like, oh no, what happened to Jessica? But then I don't think it's super clear on the cover of this book who that is, if it's supposed to be Elizabeth or Jessica. Is it Elizabeth at home later, all bedraggled and wet after the storm, or is it Jessica on the island?
Sure.
Furthermore, the outfit that she's wearing is the white gauzy top that Jessica has, but it's not the bandeau that we know her to be wearing.
Right. Yeah.
Which, by the way, all the way back on page 6, when Elizabeth sees what Jessica is wearing to the field trip, which is like flimsy thong sandals, very short, very snug ice denim shorts, and a skimpy bandeau with bare shoulders. Jessica says, "Don't worry," Jessica assured Elizabeth. She waved the gauzy white shirt she was holding in her right hand, along with her sunglasses and a bottle of tanning oil. "I won't scandalize Mr. Russo by showing up half naked for his field trip." She smiled slyly. "I'll cover up until he's not looking."
So she's self-aware.
Yeah, poor thing. But I thought of that many times during this book, that's what she's wearing during all of this. Like, that's the clothes that she has. How she didn't lose her bandeau top during the waves crashing around her, Lord only knows. Her life vest came off, but somehow the strip of
stayed.
Yeah.
Every time I wear a bandeau, I lose it just walking around. So I don't know how she made it through the surf.
Should anyone listening be unclear on what a bandeau is, it's literally like when there is a stretchy piece of like tube of fabric. It's a tube top. With no straps. Only tube. And you don't wear a bra with it. You're only wearing the tube. So I don't know how she didn't lose the tube in the waves.
And I was wondering, is bandeau the one that like ends like just above the stomach? Like, was she like stomach out too? Because I thought bandeau was just the strip, like not the whole
That's
shirt.
What I'm picturing, yeah.
That's what I was picturing also. And if she was there to get a tan, why would she cover her stomach? So I was like, man, the entire time you're...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you know what? To go back to the question of not knowing what's happened to Jessica and Winston, I'm realizing that we actually are left for a longer time not knowing if Winston is okay. Because they find his San Diego Padres baseball cap, which I thought was a fun touch. And it washes up around the same time. I say washes up. Like they find it in the water. Like the Coast Guard finds it around the same time they find that life vest that they knew Jessica was wearing.
That was also a well done, I got a little goosebumpy feeling when they found the life vest and they're like, who was wearing the yellow life vest? And then eventually deduced that it was Jessica. It was like
Ken remembers he helped her put it on.
A fun, suspenseful moment.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we've got Jessica has floated away and eventually, thank goodness, has washed up on some other island. It's not Anacapa Island. It's some tiny other island. She's like, okay, I'm safe. And she immediately falls asleep. And I guess doesn't wake up until the next morning. So nice, good sleep for her after exerting herself. She looks around and it's really beautiful. And this is what Jessica thinks to herself out loud. "This place isn't half bad," Jessica said out loud, rubbing the sore muscles in her upper arms. "This could be kind of fun. I'm a castaway, like on Gilligan's Island." Then Jessica recalled that Gilligan and his pals had been stranded on their particular island for years. Well, that couldn't happen to her. She wasn't that far from civilization. Or was she? She gets up and stretches and looks around and is scared by a noise. Who should come out of the bushes?
Winston!
It's Winston. And Jessica is not excited to see him. She's like, great. My romantic dream come true. Stranded on a deserted island with Winston Egbert.
And just the irony of like, this would be, like her ultimate fantasy. Like if she had gotten into the boat with Ken, like if the final buddy system didn't come into effect, like being this exact situation, like being stranded with a boy would be like her ultimate fantasy and like the best thing to ever happen to her. But it was just the one boy that she was not interested in, which is
I'm surprised the book didn't name drop like Blue Lagoon or something. I guess they didn't want to go there, but like what's Jessica's fantasy is, it's very romantic fantasy. But strangely enough, she really does not ever entertain a thought of romance between her and Winston. I kind of thought maybe the book would go there,
I did too. Not to skip ahead. I'm sure we'll touch on it later, but there was a moment in particular I was like, oh, is this happening? But
yeah, they start to get to know each other, or even just like, well, we'll get to it. But Winston is really like a great person to be stranded on a deserted island with, huh?
Turns out, yeah.
Like he's cooking right off the bat.
I think this is where you start to see a bigger picture of him, because even from the jump, like his choice to tap into his mind for a second. I mean, what must his thought processes have been? Like Jessica's here. She survived. Surely he had considered the fact that she had not made it because he was the one that ended up with the lifeboat. She was by herself at sea.
Right.
So like I'm sure.
And he lost the lifeboat too, by the way. So that's not so great. Like he's his clumsiness coming into play here. He like immediately loses the lifeboat.
Sure. But so when they're in that brush, and he sees her from a distance, surely there's some relief, there's some joy seeing her alive. I'm sure he would probably want to reassure her after they've both been through a near-death experience. But his choice in that moment was to play a prank on her and make it seem like there was a cannibal that was trying to eat her and then revealed himself to be himself.
Yeah.
And then we find out that he lost the lifeboat. So we're like, man, what, this guy really is a screw up. But then you start to see his true colors when he is like, oh, I caught these fish by hand. I know how to make a fire. I've cooked us a delicious meal. And you're like, oh, it turns out you're a lot more than, the dweeb you seemed like.
Yeah. So just a heads up that this book does definitely throw around a little casually, not too often, but a few times, some, I guess what we would call pretty like colonialist kind of language and fears that Jessica has about headhunters and cannibals and stuff like that. But it's not too much. They don't make too big a deal out of it. And they don't actually meet any other human beings on the island.
Sure.
So it's all just the stuff of fantasy.
I did pick up on that as well. I was like, oh, I'm glad they touched on that and moved away pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It was really only about half a page.
Yeah. But so Winston is cooking, like he's like caught fish, I guess somehow like scaled it and stuff and cut it into fillets and like wrapped it in palm leaves and cooked it over a fire. He has this like safety kit from the raft that has matches and stuff so he can start a fire, and Jessica is like really into this meal, like yum this fish. And I mean, she doesn't want to eat it every meal for her life, but she's like, this is really good. So it seemed like, I don't know where he got a knife, but it seemed like he
this Swiss Army knife also from the
oh wow, very good.
They really hooked him up. Yeah, they set him up for success.
Yeah. And a little bit later, they're going to build this crazy like structure that they're going to live in. And there's all this talk about how he uses a little bit of string to tie sticks together to build a shelter. It's like, man, this is some emergency kit, but also like good work, buddy. Like we get a glimpse that perhaps Winston may have been a Boy Scout at some point, or maybe even currently.
Is mentioned a couple times.
Yeah, he tells Jessica that she could be an Eagle Scout. Here's one passage, though, that really highlights the kind of differing priorities of Winston and Jessica, which I will say that it almost seems like Winston's presence is encouraging Jessica to be more of a like lazy good for nothing than she would be if she'd had to survive alone.
That's fair.
Like is if she's thinking about finding food until Winston shows up. And then she's just like, Winston,
I just want to work on my tan, look for some shells.
Yeah. So here's a little bit of a long passage, but I think it paints a picture of much more of the book than I'm reading. Okay? Jessica rolled her eyes. Give me a break, Egbert. You sound like a Cub Scout leader. I mean, really, finding food won't take much time at all. We can do it later. I want to do something fun. Jessica had a vision of herself wearing a skirt made of palm fronds with pink hibiscus woven in her loose, flowing hair. She would be reclining against a bower of fragrant tropical flowers when the rescue boat pulled up. One thing was for sure, she couldn't greet any handsome sailors looking like she did right now. Her shorts and shirt were wrinkled beyond belief, not to mention being torn and full of sand. Her hair was one big tangle. Improving her appearance was her top priority. Fun! Winston pronounced the word as if he'd never heard it before, which Jessica found amusing, considering he was always kidding around. Yes, Jessica said. Fun? Got something against it? Nope. Winston's expression remained self-righteous. But there's a time and place for everything. He turned away from Jessica to look out at the water and the sky. She followed his gaze. The sky had become partly cloudy, and the northwesterly breeze had picked up quite a bit since that morning. It looks like rain to me, Winston speculated. What do you think? Maybe, Jessica admitted, but I'm not a meteorologist, she added dryly. Well, I think we should wait on the food and build a shelter instead, right away. And collect some firewood and get it under cover where it'll stay dry, Winston suggested. To Jessica, that sounded even more uninteresting than gathering food. Do we have to? She moaned. Do you want to get soaking wet and freeze to death and be starving on top of that? Winston challenged her. Jessica stuck her tongue out at him. I plan to be rescued before it starts to rain, she informed him airily. Winston sighed. Women, he muttered under his breath. Which, offensive.
A little bit. They did a decent job, because there are moments like that where it's like that seems a little sexist. And then their eventual compromise after that is, well, fine, Jessica will go with him to get supplies if he lets her decorate the shelter afterwards with pretty flowers. So there are some moments like that are maybe a little cringy, but then also they make sure to also pepper in these moments of like Jessica being like a confident, strong, athletic swimmer and making it to the island on her own. And then there's this moment, not to jump ahead, but there's this moment later of him.
I think we're there.
Okay, yeah.
I have a feeling of what you're going to say, and I think we can talk about it right now.
Okay, great. Yeah. The moment where Winston's like, when they're collecting firewood, which I guess, is not really jumping ahead. It's right now. And, he was like, I'm the man. Let me carry it all. Like, I have to protect dainty women such as you. That's not the quote, but something that seems like that. And Jessica goes along with it, but they do also make sure to in her inner monologue, have her say, actually, though, I am more athletic than he is, because between like cheerleading practice and all the other things that I do, like he's punier than I am. So there are moments of sexism that are like balanced pretty well by moments of Jessica being like, actually, I am a strong woman. I'm just going to kind of, I'm tired, so I'm going to let this go.
Right. She's kind of like, I'll let him have this one because he's carrying all the shit for me. But it's funny that he says that, and he must know because I am a lot more athletic than him. And then what's about to happen is that Winston is going to insist, like a very macho man might, that he's not tired. He can carry all this stuff up this big hill because there are blueberries up there. It doesn't matter that it's steep. Like, it doesn't matter that I'm laden with all this stuff. Like, let's just go walk up there. And then once they get up there, there's a bear. And Winston is like scared shitless, and Jessica is the one who like has an idea to scare the bear away. Although ultimately it is like a crack of thunder and lightning that scares the bear away.
Sure, yeah, it's neither of them. It's the weather. I was grateful for that moment just after the insistence on like fixing her appearance, like working on her tan while she's a castaway, like finding pretty shells and all those things. So that moment of clear-headedness and strength, I think, was very important and maybe well received by the readers to be like, okay, Jessica puts up this. And I think this is where the book starts to take a turn, where you start to see the other side of Jessica and the other side of Winston, because now you're truly seeing like, she kind of puts on this, snobby kind of airy act, but like truly where it counts, like she is strong and clear-headed and she can manage herself. And then similarly to Winston, we're about to see like how this affected him emotionally and get a glimpse into, I think right now, of like his insecurities and how that causes him to be the class clown that he is.
Let me see if I can find what he says. Jessica is like trying to kind of cheer him up a little bit. He says, "Thanks for cheering me up." "Hey, it was nothing." She punched him lightly on the shoulder. "And besides, I meant every word I said. I do admire you." I mean, she's told him that she admires him and is like grateful for the help that he's given her in like keeping them safe and dry. Winston shook his head with a disbelieving smile. If anyone had ever told me I'd hear Jessica Wakefield say something like that to me, I'd have thought they were crazy. Jessica laughed. "Am I all that bad?" she asked. "Well," Winston hesitated, "I've got to admit, I always thought you were, well, sort of, a little bit of a snob." Jessica raised one eyebrow and gave Winston a furious look, but she knew she couldn't really get mad at him. It might sting a little, but he was telling the truth. "Well," she said, deciding that it was time for true confessions. She could at least get a lick in. "I always thought you were a complete goon." So he goes on to say, "It's not always a barrel of laughs being the class clown. I mean, it's like any label, I guess. I'm the class clown, so I always have to do something funny. I have a reputation to live up to, And sometimes I know I go overboard with it. Like yesterday on the field trip. I was driving you crazy playing pranks on you, wasn't I?" So he's saying there, I kind of keep doing it because it's what everybody expects of me, basically.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, but he is this capable person. Also, I mean, before he cooked that delicious meal of fish and oranges, Jessica was being a real snob. She was like, "I want nothing to do with you. Don't speak to me. You lost the lifeboat." And she sulked away. But
she's like, "I can catch my own fish,
Exactly. And then Winston cooked food for her anyways. And had it waiting for her for when she changed her mind.
And even like tries to make a big show of how he's talking about like the food, how good it's going to be, like to try to entice her back to eat it, which is really good spirited of him.
Exactly. And then when she finally changes her mind, he doesn't make a thing of it. He's just like, "Oh, great. Glad you're here. Have a fish." He didn't say like, "You told me a second ago that I'm never supposed to talk to you again." Like he was gracious and shared everything.
We definitely see the best and worst of Winston this episode, I would say. Or this episode, in this book.
Yeah, definitely.
This seems like as good a time as any to talk about like what's happening meanwhile back in Sweet Valley.
Sure.
One funny thing that happens that first night is that the Wakefields are all, Stephen has come home from college, Kara, his girlfriend, is there. They're like awaiting news. And Lila Fowler calls the house. Yeah. And I thought the phone call was pretty funny. Lila calls and Elizabeth takes the call and Lila's really upset about Jessica being missing, understandably. "What if I never see Jessica again?" Lila asked, on the verge of hysteria. "I've been mean to her so many times. I'll never have a chance to tell her I'm sorry." Elizabeth was sympathetic. Lila was Jessica's best friend after all, but at the same time she didn't exactly feel like listening to a confession of all the catty things Lila had said and done to Jessica over the years. "Look, Lila, there's no need to feel badly." Elizabeth hurried to reassure her. That is so funny. Sorry, the phrase "feel badly" always makes me think of my dad and his best friend because they made... Sorry, this is such an aside, but I have to share it, especially since the Gladiators know my dad. They made these t-shirts that say, "I feel badly" for the predicate adjective, which is just like a little fun joke for them, a little grammar joke, because like "feel badly" is a weird thing to say. So anyway, we'll shout out to my dad and his best friend, Uncle Brett. "Look, Lila, there's no need to feel badly." Elizabeth hurried to reassure her. "I know you and Jess have had your differences, but..." Lila cut her off mid-sentence. "All the times I've made her feel inferior because she can't afford as many expensive clothes as I can, and she doesn't have her own car or as much jewelry, and all the times we've fought over boys." Elizabeth fought the urge to hang up on Lila, who had begun sniffling even more loudly. "Lila, I promise I'll call you as soon as we hear anything," she said patiently. "Jessica wouldn't want you to be so upset. I'm sure she's stolen as many boys away from you as you've stolen from her. That seemed to comfort Lila somewhat. Thanks, Liz, she said, sounding more composed. And tell your parents, I hope, well, you know. So that's the end of the call. That comforted Lila somewhat. So there's Elizabeth is really stressed out. She doesn't want to countenance the idea of Jessica being dead.
Sure.
And she's really sick of answering questions about it because everybody wants to know, of course. Jessica's like one of the most popular people in school. And Winston is too, frankly, despite being, a goon or being popular for the maybe not the best reasons. He's a very popular guy. There's another passage where he talks about always being invited to parties because
he brings the entertainment.
The guys talk about how they always invite him to parties because it's like, for sure you'll always have a laugh. And there's even this whole conversation where they think about how they should have been nicer to him. And Elizabeth is like, I can't stand this. You guys are talking about them like we're at a funeral and you're eulogizing.
Oh, that was another moment. Oh, that I was very grateful we knew Jessica was okay just because I'm a wimp around sad things, like I said.
Yeah.
But that moment of her being like, you guys are acting like you're at a funeral. And then you didn't hear? You don't know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the reveal that they had found the empty lifeboat floating away. So everyone at that point had made up their minds that they were both dead.
And it kind of seems like even the Wakefield parents are
Absolutely.
like kind of trying to be realistic. Like I think, because the next thing that happens is that Elizabeth and Stephen can't sit around anymore. So they're going to go out on Nicholas Morrow's yacht to try to hunt the seas themselves for Jessica and Winston. And at some point their parents say something like, we don't want to lose you guys too. Mm-hmm. And it's the two that Elizabeth gets really upset about.
And in the moment of after they return, I think she comments on that to Stephen and says I don't think they think Jessica's still alive, or I don't think they're holding out hope. And even Stephen starts to say well, the odds aren't great. We have to, we have to entertain the idea. Surely, the situation is not looking good.
Right. I had been waiting for something to come up that finally gets invoked here, which is Jessica and Elizabeth are identical twins. Mm-hmm. They have this twin power, this sense that we recently talked to a twin on the show who can vouch for this. And I have heard tell of this sort of feeling that you have of having a kind of cosmic connection. I mean, I feel like cosmic is maybe the wrong word because I almost want to say this is something that should be investigated, what kind of mirror neurons or something or could be at play
scientific.
Here.
Absolutely.
Mr. Russo could study it for an extra credit class. But
in whatever field of study it's in, he covers all science, so he's on top of it.
All-purpose science expert, just like you, Haley.
Thanks.
So Elizabeth does finally say to him, she can't be dead. I'd know. And Stephen is like, okay, you know what? Sure. Okay. And, but we didn't say that they didn't have any luck finding Winston and Jessica on their yacht trip because despite the fact that before they leave, Mr. Wakefield is like, okay, well, the weather's good today.
Yes, he said, oh, the weather's perfect. Go on ahead. And I was like, how do you know that, sir?
And then sure enough, they're
sure.
friggin' 15 minutes into their boat trip, the clouds kick up again like they so often do in Southern California. It's constantly storming out here.
Yeah.
And they have to turn around so that they don't have a recreation of the previous day's drama on the sea. So they don't get any closer to discovering Jessica and Winston.
Yeah, that was a long build up to a very disappointing end of that attempt.
Yeah. It's like the book needed to have them be doing something.
Sure, they can't just sit in the house.
Yeah. I kind of thought that the book was going to have Elizabeth find Jessica because
that's what I thought
that
was
would
going
be
to happen
exciting.
Too.
Yeah,
we were getting towards the end when they were setting out, and I was like, "Great, this is what happens." The Coast Guard couldn't find him, but Elizabeth uses her twin powers and finds Jessica. I definitely thought that's where it was going as well. But they surprised us.
That would have been fun, but instead, what happens is the rains come to the island, and, Winston and Jessica have to, keep shelter, but they stay dry in their shelter. Another evening is coming, and Jessica starts to think, like, well, what if we're stuck here for a long time? And here is what she thinks. Jessica half shut her eyes, squinting at the sinking sun. What if she was stuck there forever? What if, despite what Winston said, the island was uncharted and the rescuers never found it? Jessica pictured herself 20 years from now, still dressed in the same ragged bandeau and pair of shorts, with snarled hair down to her feet. How was she supposed to shave her legs and brush her teeth? She imagined growing old with Winston, who would look like Rip Van Winkle after 20 years of solitude, his beard reaching all the way to his knobby knees. Ugh, Jessica exclaimed out loud, wrinkling her nose in disgust. What a fate! And it goes on a paragraph later or so. Ken Matthews would date some other girl, forgetting Jessica Wakefield even existed.
Which was interesting because it seemed like it was just kind of an interest of the day, and now it's grown into like her lifelong lost love.
Right. Oh, I guess I might as well just read this whole passage here. She would never see her family again. Elizabeth and Stephen would grow up and leave home. Stephen would marry Kara, and Elizabeth would marry Jeffrey, and Jessica, simply by virtue of being a castaway, would be deprived of her right to be maid of honor at both ceremonies. Ken Matthews would date some other girl, forgetting Jessica Wakefield ever existed. She would never get to be a senior at Sweet Valley High. Oof, that one stings, since that's not going to happen for Jessica. Wow, at least not in this series. She'd miss all the fun of graduation. All of a sudden, Jessica missed her family and friends so much it hurt. Lila, Kara, Amy. Oh, there's a trio of friends you gotta be stranded to miss. Anyway, at that moment, she even would have been glad to see Enid Rollins, her twin's best friend. I'll never shop at the Valley Mall again, Jessica wailed to herself. All the new European fashions will come in at Lizette's and I won't be there to buy them. I'll be wearing palm leaves while Lila wears the latest Italian leather outfits. It's not fair. Poor Jessica.
It's a commitment to the type of character that she is, truly.
Yeah.
Like, it's been doubled and tripled and quadrupled down.
Even after all this. And then, I mean, she goes ahead and she like essentially starts to pray. Like, it's not a prayer to God per se. It's a prayer to the universe. But same difference, really, if you ask me.
Yeah.
She's like, promises I'll be nicer if I get rescued. I'll develop the other side of me that Winston's been talking about, you know? She's like, I'm going to be a better person if only I can get rescued. What should happen? But suddenly in the distance, a sound. It's the booming cutting of the air of the helicopter thingies.
The Coast Guard.
I lost some steam on my beautiful poetry there by forgetting what the blades of a helicopter are called.
You painted a beautiful picture. And Jessica being Jessica, I think the first thought before, yay, I've been rescued, is he looks kind of cute.
Yep, that is exactly what it is. Sort of cute. So they're rescued and like cut to the other side of, they're getting off the helicopter and there's press everywhere. Is Jessica keeping like in response to her prayers being immediately answered, instant gratification prayer? Has Jessica changed into a better person?
Immediately, no.
She has forgotten her vow.
Immediately takes the spotlight, takes credit for everything Winston did on the island.
And Winston is back to being class clown, right? And to the point where, he's making jokes about how he says that he was the entertainment on the island. And then when Elizabeth goes home with Jessica and they start, laughing and bickering a little bit, they even say essentially like, it's a return to status quo.
Absolutely, yeah.
Back to normal. Let's never speak of this again.
Definitely. And even a little bit of, you get that immediately in chapter 13. Elizabeth's like, finally, I've written about this in the paper, so nobody has to talk about it again. All the details are here. Nobody has to ask me any more questions. Like, we'll move on so Jessica can get out of the limelight. But
she literally thinks that thought. Like, now I don't have to hear about this anymore.
There was an interesting moment, though, in that exchange with her and Winston, the reporters, where he didn't seem upset about her just immediately, bounding forward and taking credit for everything. Because there was a moment where like the reporters addressed him directly, and before letting him take the stage, she gave him a very pointed wink. And that's when Winston was like, I brought the entertainment. So it was sort of like, now's your chance to like uphold, this persona that you've created for yourself. Like it was almost like a wink of like, we know who each other really is, but I'm going to act, like this, like over the top popular girl. And like, I'm going to let you act like the entertainer so nobody knows who you really are. So nobody ever figures out each other. And I thought that was an interesting take. It was almost like she was doing him a favor by taking all the credit, being like, I won't tell anyone you helped. Wink. Everyone will just think you're the entertainment, just like you want.
Right. Where like in reality, it's, I don't know, it's almost kind of a tragedy that these characters have like had this, the extreme thing happen to them. They've learned and grown, and they get back to the mainland and immediately have to return to their like former selves.
Yeah.
And gladly,
Gladly. Like Winston was given the opportunity to uphold his reputation of being the funny guy. Like they were like, oh, thank goodness. Like the status quo. I think they even say when they were, like you said, like bickering and teasing each other, like someone was like back to normal, and then Elizabeth or somebody was like, you mean back to crazy? Like,
it's very, very like Brady Bunch, like kind of sitcom ending.
Yes, definitely.
Or Gilligan's Island.
Gilligan's Island.
Except instead of, in Gilligan's Island, of course, they would have remained on the island, as Jessica, observes to herself.
After this whole buildup of Elizabeth's experience of the thought of, dealing with losing her sister forever, we didn't really get to see them like come together. It was almost like Jessica was like she saw the reporters behind her, so she let Stephen and Elizabeth give her a quick hug, and then they moved on to like their bickering. And I was like, I kind of want that gratification of Elizabeth and Jessica, like the two sisters who thought that they were never going to see each other again, like coming together and seeing their love and their bond. But I guess it almost is more powerful because it's like siblings interact like siblings no matter what. So maybe like seeing them go back to normal is almost better, and like speaks more deeply to like their siblingdom.
Well, and what the parents say is, Jessica, I can't believe we have you back. Which I thought was an interesting way to put it. They really were pretty sure she was dead. Like, I guess, I can't believe it. You're not dead.
It was kind of this air of, oh, you're here. This is crazy. All right, get back in the car. Let's go home. Like
it wasn't you off. We got to keep the good one.
Like nobody was like, oh, thank God. I guess kind of.
That's what they mean,
Winston's family was more like that. Winston's mom, who was sobbing and clutching him, and that beautiful moment of Maria.
Oh, he picks up his girlfriend Maria. Oh, that was so sweet.
She was like, let me down. And he was like, no, I never thought I'd be able to hold you again, so I'm going to hold you a little longer. Yeah. Winston got the emotional reuniting. And then Jessica's was more like for the cameras.
This is maybe a little bit like screwed up, but I have to admit that when I read Winston say that to Maria, like, I thought I'd never get to hold you again, so I'm never going to put you down. I was just like, oh man, that's the kind of thing that like when these two break up, if they ever do, that's really going to haunt them. Like that's where my brain went. Like I don't see Maria and Winston staying together forever. So I feel like this particular moment is going to be one of those things that Maria writes like angry Olivia Rodrigo songs about. Like, you didn't really mean what you said, Winston.
Because they're 17, so probably they're not like each other's forever person. I thought that too. All of like, I don't know, even the allusions beforehand to like, I don't know what Maria sees in him. They seem completely incompatible. And then they get this like like they probably have the most heartfelt reuniting of any two people after they get back.
That's true.
But yeah, I know that the Wakefields were happy to see Jessica again. I know that just because it wasn't necessarily expressly written doesn't mean that they weren't thrilled to have their daughter back.
Yeah. Well, luckily Jessica didn't pick up on any of those vibes because she's very sensitive to maybe not being appreciated by her family.
Oh.
I mean, this book was such an unusual one, Haley. Because we launched right into it and didn't do any of the early on, like, hey, have you ever read these books before kind of conversation that I often start with. I didn't get to point out or observe to you that this is such a strange book. Like, to have there hasn't really been one like this before. I mean, certainly not a book where they were stranded on an island, but just like to have this level of wildness of the events and have it be, I don't know, it's just so goofy too. It's really pretty goofy.
It was out there. It was larger than life. I mean, the lead into the next book at the end seemed like the entire thing was about Olivia.
Yeah, frizzy-haired Olivia Davidson. There's these new classes, mini courses coming to Sweet Valley High, and everybody's all abuzz. It's like the new slam books, these mini courses, which it sounds like cool people are going to be the professors, and they're going to teach interesting subjects like modeling and electronics.
And no grades.
And so Olivia is thinking, like, maybe I'll meet a boy. So maybe you can tease the next book for us, Haley, much like Lost at Sea.
Sure.
It's a pretty amusing little tag where the title of the next book sets up a potential answer to the question that is being asked that is, like, alarming.
A little bit. Okay, you ready? Will Olivia Davidson find the romance she's dreaming of when mini courses come to Sweet Valley High? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 57, Teacher Crush.
Awesome. So that's not going to be problematic at all.
But it also, I know what you mean, that, if the entire next book is about a crush, and then this, the events of the last one compared to what seem like, are going to be the events of the next one, it seems like, I don't know, actually, because having a crush on a teacher is, I think, probably if anything transpires between them, maybe that is just as dire as a shipwreck.
Yeah.
One is very interpersonal versus the last one is like this huge, like, epic tale of the elements. It seems very different.
I'm hoping and also kind of expecting that nothing is going to come of this teacher crush.
Sure.
I feel like that's probably the lesson of the book.
Fingers crossed.
Now that we've gotten all the way through the book, Haley, the last little bit of business that we have is for me to ask you a question I ask all my guests, which is, are you an Elizabeth or a Jessica?
Definitely an Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah. You mean the science expert who was really excited about the prospect of tide pools on Anacapa Island at the outset of the book, just like Elizabeth was?
Yeah, it's pretty cut and dry.
What was the thing that you had? There were some, like, facts about you that the writers for Tappity had to look at early on, and it was like you kept some kind of, like, mold diary, or it wasn't mold, it was
mulch collection. I did.
Mulch.
When I was in very early elementary school, I would collect mulch from the playground that were, like, different shapes and sizes and unique formations. I specifically remember getting very excited if there was ones with, like, little holes in them.
Wow.
Have you seen those? Like there's, like, perfectly cut out, like, little knots. And anyways, I categorized them, and it was a sight. It was a sight to be seen. They're in the Smithsonian somewhere now.
All right. So we definitely got an Elizabeth on our hands. Well, maybe we can talk just a little bit more briefly about science and maybe any science field trips, things like that, high school science memories in our extra drama episode next week. But for now, all that remains is for me to say, Haley, thank you so much for reading Lost at Sea with me.
Thank you. I don't think I ever would have come across Sweet Valley High. And I read this whole thing in an afternoon. It was super enjoyable. I had a lot of fun reading it.
Yay. Well, they are easy breezy, and this was a particularly fun one. Is there anything that you want the listeners to know about to, like, seek you out or find you on anywhere, anything you're doing?
Yeah, Tappity first and foremost. If you want to know more about tide pools, I'm sure we've got an episode on that somewhere. If we've piqued your interest in talking about this episode.
Hopefully, no 4 to 9-year-olds listening to this podcast. But if you are, hey, tell your mom or dad to download Tappity for you and on some sort of mobile device that you have access to. Well, gladiators, what I have to plug is Sweet Valley Diaries, the podcast, and the process of promoting it to your friends and loved ones. Tell people about the podcast. Thank you so much for your beautiful reviews. Thank you so much to everybody who sends fun comments and notes and stuff on Instagram, where the podcast is at Sweet Valley Diaries. And I'll just say, if you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, Metaphoria, yet, and you're interested at all, you can find it at substack.flaxbart.com. It's not about Sweet Valley Diaries or Sweet Valley High, except sometimes. But that's something that I'm doing that I am proud of and I feel like plugging. So check that out. Haley, we'll talk a little bit more now, but the gladiators won't hear it till next week. So Thank you so much for doing this.
You are so very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yay.
Yay! Thank you, listeners.
Advice. If you go on a sea trip, buckle your life safety vest.
It's the biggest takeaway. Also, truly, in reading this book, I feel like I got a lot of survival tips from Winston, If you're stranded on a desert island and it's about to rain, collect firewood, because once it gets wet, it won't start a fire, I never would have thought of that.
It's a good tip. And it's one to remember. If you need a survival guide for a deserted island in the Channel Islands, pick up Lost at Sea, Gladiators, and read it carefully. Take notes.
So does that mean Miss America?
Jessica had dated Ken occasionally in the past, but Elizabeth had thought that was it. Gosh, I'm having a hard time with this. But Elizabeth had thought that was it as far as their romance was concerned.